works. Other people, it's just how, feeling excluded. If there's a clique at work and, if you're a child that was constantly excluded by your siblings and you see other people are forming relationships and you're not able to penetrate that can you can start to feel those physical feelings of I'm being rejected again, I'm being abandoned again. For other people, it might be, as you're doing your KPIs and areas to improve on, someone gives you 30 areas you're good at, and then there's one room for improvement and you can't sleep for 29 days, and it's February and there's not 29 days and you still can't sleep because that criticism touches on a narrative that is about I'm not enough, I'm not good enough. And that is what makes you not sleep at night, because of the meaning and the narrative that you've attached to that simple sentence of, hey, here is a thing I would like you to work on in the next quarter. And that means they're going to fire me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So what you're saying is before we attach meaning to something negative or negative statement, we should first observe it and be like, okay, someone has said X about me or to me. I'm going to, what do you assess it as an objective? I'm going to look at it as just an objective statement rather than attach this meaning of I'm not worthy to it and have it control my day or my month or my year. Is that how you deal with it?
Yes, and that is a process. It's like learning a new skill. It's like learning how to ride a bike, because you've literally have not been taught how to self-regulate. So for most of us, growing up in African households, we were literally never taught how to emotionally regulate. So we didn't know, I can feel bad, but still, I can do this and still, There was no sense of being taught the skills to emotionally bring our hyper arousal into, so when we feel things, there's a very high intensity around how we feel around things, because there wasn't a mirroring parent. So what I'm saying is learning a new skill, so you have to be really gentle with yourself. So it's about what I call non-judgmental witnessing of your ego at work.
Non-judgmental
Okay. And you have to absorb, I am now feeling insulted, I'm now feeling this. Yeah. And it's like a stop sign at the traffic light, and you just literally have to visualize it and just go, actually it could be that, or I could tell myself a different story. So the way, for me, what I normally tell people is that when an event happens, and the reaction happens, often it feels like there's no space in between, because it feels like the event has happened and then you're starting to hyperventilate or to feel, it feels instant. As soon as you hear the words, the heart starts beating almost immediately. And so it feels like those things are very intersected. But what I like to remind people is that actually the space between the event and the reaction, there's often some space, and that space is called choice. And in that time, even if it's in milliseconds, you have to make the choice of the narrative you choose to interpret that situation through. And often, isn't it interesting that often we choose the narrative that makes us feel the most shit about ourselves?
Yes,
we go, I'll just go to that narrative that says I'm a piece of shit,
Yeah, you're just like, okay, I guess I'm a piece of shit.
I guess I'm not enough.
That is where your mind takes you. And so, like, how does it, so now that we're in the knowledge of the trauma, that we do have generational trauma, or we do have childhood trauma, how does that in turn translate into our relationships with our families now? Because I also see a lot of friction in families, a lot of, black sheep, or you're this or you're that, or you're different, or why can't you be like this? How does that manifest in terms of our relationship with our current, like, nuclear family, for example?
When I started doing trauma work and really, so there was this time when I was pretty pissed off at my parents for leaving me, and and again, I couldn't really quite vocalize that because, again, who are you to tell us? And everybody was left. So what makes you special about this? So. But then as I started to do this trauma work, and started to understand the context, it helps me to release my parents, emotionally release them. And this is what I mean. My mom was 18. I'm a 30-year-old, I'm a 30-something-year-old woman, and I'm just like, if someone put a baby in front of me, I'm like, what do I do with it? Okay.
So something.
Yes. And I'm like, this was an 18-year-old.
A child.
A child is having a child. And I know sometimes in some cultural context, this is, considered a legal age and all those things. But with my grown-up eyes now, I'm like, when I was 18, I was just still thinking about if boys liked me or not. I wasn't like,
that boy's
trying to raise a human being, And the more I've just realized these things and extending that grace to my mother particularly, and just seeing she did it despite of, and also contextualizing how she was parented herself. So contextualizing my grandparents and how the pain they went through, it helps me to release them because it makes me think nobody actively chooses this. Every single pain that I experience from these interactions.
There is those who abuse and whatever, but generally we're talking about parents who inadvertently pass these things on.
That's right, unconsciously. And it helped me, honestly, instead of feeling angry, to have compassion for them. Like, how difficult must it have been to live with this kind of pain and never, ever, ever have an opportunity to be supported through it.
Yeah.
And it must have been so tough for my mom as an 18-year-old to just be that shamed and not have a person to lean on. It must have been so tough for my grandparents, to live through that kind of stuff and just literally never, ever have anybody to support you through it. Yeah. And so for me, when I see it through that context, I just feel deep compassion for them. And I go, my God, if I transpose myself to their timeline, I'm like, I just do not know what I could have done. That takes a lot of resilience sometimes to survive the kind of trauma they survived, and that's not to excuse the things that they did that were harmful, but it's to see them in context of their environment, and to start extending a bit of grace, so once I used to think, a certain way about my parents. And now as I learned about all these things, I went, my God, she's really a badass. And the moment I started to think of my mom as a badass, like, you did this at 18, our relationship transformed because I was able to see her now, actually as a feminist agent. I was like, you could have literally aborted this kid to retain your reputation. Yeah. You could have done so many other things, but you chose the hard path. You did the hard thing.
And the judgment and the rejection.
You took it all. Yeah. You took it all and still were able to raise a good human being. Yeah. And you are able to remain good yourself. You didn't let this experience completely erode your sense of dignity. And the moment I started to have a different perspective, it started to transform my relationship with my own mother, because I was like, man, she's a badass. If it was me, I would just not have been able to cope through this. And so I stopped feeling like a victim of my mom's abandonment, but rather the fact that I'm empowered by those choices because she did all those choices kind of to look after me. Because every story is about perspective.
Yeah.
And when I tell myself this version of the story, I feel very closely connected and aligned to my mother. When I choose the other story of how dare she abandons me, I'm like, you know.
It's difficult to connect with her. Yeah.
And when I talk to my mom, it's the second story that is true for her. You know, she says, "But I did these things so that you could have, you know."
And
So the second story actually makes more sense to have that as my perspective, because it was the truth for her. You know.
So I'd really because I'd really also want to encourage everyone watching, including myself, right? That sometimes we can get stuck in these stories. Now,
is there an African child who's never asked themselves, like, I'm running away? I'm packing my bags and going. I'm not loved. And then your parents will be there at the door going, see you, bye. How can we help with this new transition of your life? And you're like, I guess I'll go back to my room and never talk to anybody.
I did
hear from people who never tried to run away. Tell us why you're God's favorite. Tell us why you're God's favorite. You know?
The comments, tell us if you didn't plan your exit when you were a kid. Because me, I packed my things. You know those green paper bags that had the calendar? I packed all my little clothes in there and I was like, I'm going.
And it is possible. When we talk about a story, I want to really make it so clear that it is possible for two things to be true at the same time. You know? Like, my mom could have hurt me that way, but also she did this other thing, right?
Yeah. So you could,
like, it is possible. You could have two multiple realities which are true.
Okay, so you could have a situation where, okay, my dad beat me brutally, but my dad also loves me. You can have that, right?
Like, because the trauma you experienced is told a certain way. There's also multiple versions of a story, but sometimes we only choose a small version of the story that suits us and that confirms an already deeply embedded story for ourselves. So because it's very conflictual to say I was beaten but I was also loved, we choose to have a story that already, you know,
like if I was.
But it is possible to say I was beaten, it hurt me deeply, but I also acknowledge my father thought they did it to prune me and to discipline me, and they did the best with what they knew
at the time,
you know, at the time, you know. But also that's not to disqualify people who deliberately, physically, sexually, verbally abuse their children, knowing that, you know, I'm actually doing this. Again, we're talking about the parents who pass on those things.
We're talking generally in the sense that we acknowledge, and maybe this is even a topic we should cover another day, but we acknowledge there's people who have been traumatized by parents who actually abused them, molested them, and did horrible things to them. We're talking in the context of, you know, not that context. We're talking about generally the things and the just for being naughty, but we're not covering, you know, that the deeper.
Yeah, that's a totally different conversation, and the trauma imprint around that is expressed very, very differently. Yeah. So it's also important to understand that your parents also never had another blueprint from which to parent. They did what they thought was best. And so because our brain sometimes only wants to create singular stories, like Chimamanda says, often we can't think that multiple stories are true at the same time. We will choose a story that serves us. But what I'm actually encouraging people who are watching to think about is, how can you update the script of your story?
Yeah, how can we fix this? How do we do the work? And if our parents and siblings are willing to do the work with us, how can we all do the work?
Number one, go to therapy, people. Just this sense of Anga Africans, the only Jesus is your therapeutic point. First of all, girl, you need to go and see
Jesus or a bottle of
therapist.
Yeah. So
let's start from there. Normalize going to therapy even when you're not in a crisis, right? This is what I talk about, creating your emotional muscle. So think about it as going to the gym. When you go to the gym and you build your physical muscle, you don't go, muscle now done, I'm never stepping into the gym again because I'm now ripped. You just go 2 weeks home and it's gone, right? It's the same with the emotional muscle. You don't always go when you want to lose emotional weight. Yes. You don't just go when you want to lose emotional weight. You need to go there to constantly keep the muscle strong. And also when you're in a crisis, you hear things differently. When you're clear-headed, go to therapy. You know, because you also process things very differently, because there is the gift of insight that is not clouded by the event and the trauma that is currently bubbling on the surface. So when you can afford it, and if it's possible,
I was gonna say therapy is for you. One of those things, unfortunately, that is a privilege. We can't all access therapy. We can't all access a therapist. We don't all have money or resources or even internet, whatever. So if I can't go to therapy, get myself to a therapist, what else can I do?
So luckily we live in the age of the internet right now. And there's so many things that you can access that are about caring for yourself. And everybody can be a self-healer, right? It starts with insight. It starts with developing your consciousness and the willingness to do the work. Not everybody is toxic all the time. Sometimes you're the common denominator in this relationship. Sorry to drop the truth. And if you are the common denominator and always posting stuff about this year, I'm dropping all toxic people, you know? Sometimes you're the one who needs to be dropped, you know, because you need to go and do the work, right? So recognizing the willingness that sometimes you're the toxic partner, that sometimes you're the toxic parent, that sometimes you're the toxic friend, you know, and being able to say, right, how can I see that without judgment and be conscious of my own patterns of behavior? You know, because most of the work that I ask people to do is because I don't see clients every day. You know, I see them monthly, and I say the work of therapy is when you leave the session. That's when you go and get to do therapy. Yeah, that's when you get to do the work. And so if you're not able to afford therapy, you can start doing the self-healing journey. And that starts with recognizing your patterns. You know, I always tell everybody, have a journal. The first point is write your triggers. This is how you start to connect the dots of your life. It's like, I was really upset when that person left the dishes undone, you know, and not done. But really, it's never about the dishes. It's about they didn't consider me. They were not thoughtful. So what that means is I'm not worthy of consideration. It's never the dishes, right?
Oh, wow.
I'm not worthy of being considered. I'm not worthy of someone taking their time to say, oh, Dee would really love to come home to a, you know, clean kitchen and well-made food. So it goes into a narrative about you, because dishes are just the dishes, right? Oh, I'm the one who is always doing the emotional labor in this relationship and the physical labor in this relationship. So what then does that mean? You are the person who is not worthy of being considered. So even the considerate need to be considered, you know, because we also have that place where we need that other people are thoughtful of us and are considerate.
Even the healer needs healing.
Yes, absolutely. So do the work, start keeping a journal, write your triggers, and start noticing those patterns, and then be committed to never just being on autopilot. What's your first emotional response to something? Is it anger? Is it silence? Is it passive aggressiveness? Is it aggression? Is it to withdraw? If that's your autopilot reaction, challenge yourself to break your autopiloted reactions. Those autopilot reactions are wonderful because they were created to protect you when you needed that. But now you're no longer in danger, sis, so you can stop being on autopilot all the time. The ego needed to create those responses to kind of keep you safe, so that you can be hyper vigilant if you're not in a safe environment, so that you can be super aware if you're in an environment where you don't feel safe. But now you don't need to bring that same response to a relationship that doesn't require that response. So you can go, that was a response that I needed to have as a child, but it's really not the response I need to have in this relationship, because it's not a relationship that actually makes me unsafe. So I don't need to have that response as if I'm under threat or as if I'm in danger. So try challenging your autopiloted responses, you know. And for me, you know, as an example, I know one of the things is, for example, with my partner, if he changes his mind on things, it used to really bother. Not changes his mind about opinions.
Me as well, a lot. Is it a cancer?
Yeah, I'm like, so you changed the plan. Why?
Let me tell you something. This is something that
You're even holding yourself like this. I'm just about.
I think my sisters probably used to laugh a lot about. I get vexed when people switch up. Like, if you say you're coming today and you're not dead and you don't come. Really?
The Holy Spirit touches you at a deep and intimate place and you decide, no, we wouldn't do that, we will do this.
Yeah. Good. What is that trigger? What is it?
Children who never had control in their childhood.
Oh!
Yeah. Decisions were made for them, where you go to school, what do you study, what do you do this. Everything was just kind of, they didn't feel like they had a lot of control to have a say, to create agency in their lives, you know. Everything was just kind of decided by other people. It was me. I just don't remember ever being asked what I needed. Decisions were just made. Yes, we are moving. Yes, we are doing this, you know. And
okay, this is
you are just supposed to be okay with that. And also the other thing is that, I don't know for other people, but there's this thing where our parents never felt that they owed their children commitment in a certain way. So if a parent said, oh, I'll come and we'll go to town on Saturday, and they just never committed. And you're there the whole week doing, we're going to town. And your mom is sleeping until 12. And you're like, so you're going to town. So children who never had control and children whose commitments were never honored. Oh, you know, and I know for, you know, I watched something the other day that resonated so deeply with me, and I had a discussion with my partner about it. And it was, my love language is acts of service, right? Yeah, do shit for me, do stuff for me, buy me a Prado. Yeah, that's also my love language. But I remember watching something about why people who have acts of service as their love language, and I never quite knew why, when he did stuff for me or bought stuff for me or did these things for me, why I felt, you know, so thought of and considered, you know. And it's just minor stuff. It's like, I just made dinner. I was gonna make it anyway.
Yeah.
No, but you made the one that I love. You know, all those things just made something. And this psychologist was talking about people, adult people who end up craving acts of service as their love language. These are mostly from children whose literally actions mean more than words.
Because words,
so you could tell me you love me from here to Timbuktu but that never meant anything for me as a kid. People said stuff all the time and they never committed to it and they never honored stuff. I have one distinct memory of not being visited one time in high school. And our visiting days were...
Oh, that is a no-no. You cannot...
Yeah, and I just stood at the gate all day, because I'd been promised, and I couldn't work out, they forget, and that was... But it was also a pattern, we said we'll do things and then they don't happen, and then something is promised and then it's taken away. I have some distinct memories about that, or gaslighted about it. I never said that. You had it wrong. So there was this sense that a parent just shouldn't have the impetus to honor their commitment to their child because they're the figure parent and they can change their mind anytime with no explanation or no apology, because it's not going to have a consequence for the child. I know you love me, but, there is no such... For me, I ended up having this narrative. There's no such thing as love, only proof of love, and I just need to see it. Yeah, when you show up, I'll believe it.
Yeah.
When you do that stuff, I'll believe it, because there are so many little acts of betrayal for me and lack of commitment that I had to realize for me that when my partner changed his mind about stuff, about our plans together, that was a trigger for me, and I needed to explain because I didn't figure it for a long time. I don't understand. It's such a simple thing. He just wants to go there instead of there. It doesn't make a difference. But for me, it made a difference because it was a live wire straight into all these, things that I felt that were never honored. And I had to wait. Goalposts were changed. Things were promised. Things were never committed. So you can see how little things and you never know sometimes what it is that you end up carrying into adulthood. Sometimes it's just
I really, really don't want to subconsciously transfer some shit to my kids that they won't know where it came from. So I really try.
You can be a cycle breaker. Even though we've talked about all these things and a lot of things coming from generations, worst version of it is to be unaware of it. So you're just unconsciously transporting it without knowing. You can be a cycle breaker. And the parents that I work with who sometimes end up being their parents with their parents, and they go, oh, I did the thing. I go home and repair the relationship with your child. Go and apologize. Teach your child that you're human, you make mistakes, and you did a thing that was not okay by them. Now, that's an extreme sport for, African parents to apologize, but that's a conversation for a whole day. But we are trying to do it differently because we are not going to get it right all the time in this generation. Talking about hair, talking about skin. I don't know whether you grew up with those things about Fair and Lovely. They were just invaded in our high school.
I tried to bleach my skin with our house help's bleaching cream. I was just like, oh, okay. Because I remember even her, she told me, oh, don't sit in the sun, you'll become dark. I was like, oh, okay. So there was already this messaging about do not be dark, which is another topic about colorism. But she was lighter than me, and she was like, you should be light like me. So she used to encourage me to put on her bleaching cream, and I did.
Wow. And you were a kid. And these are the different ways in which we can say your self-expression as a child was curated at every point, from your hair to your skin, to your dressing, to your speech, to your sitting down. So when you grow up, who exactly are you supposed to be? Because you can't be everything you are. So the person you end up in adulthood is actually a fraud. It's actually a fraud because that's not you. I've only just started doing yoga and stretching because I realized I can't actually put sit cross-legged because of that nonsense of sit like this and sit like this, and the idea of sitting like this. I'm like,
when you shake your
and
legs.
tulikuwa tunadhani wazungu ndio wanakaanga hivyo. They just sit on their legs. I don't know whether you remember that. And we have to sit like
very
this.
well, because like I tell you, I was very much a tomboy. I was very boyish. And so I used to sit with my legs, however. And I remember being told you can't sit, endless times, you can't sit like that. Or a girl doesn't cross her legs or shake her legs in public.
What kind of adults are we supposed to be?
Exactly.
When every essence of us is actually not us.
Yeah.
So you no wonder in adulthood we struggle with so many feelings of feeling like you're not enough. Of course you're not enough because you're not yourself. You're not an enough version of you. You know? This version that you're in right now is not you. So of course it's not enough.
Yeah.
I was joking with my partner the other day that, talking about traumas and parents and how they self-express. So for a long time, I don't think my parents have ever said the words "I love you" to me. Ever, ever, ever. I don't think they've ever maybe they have to my sister who is younger. She's being parented differently. Me and my brother. And absolutely. And it used to bother me. It's just like, what is this? And of course it taps into those stories again of maybe it's because I wasn't wanted, or maybe it's because of this. And then I grew up and I did this work and I started to have real compassion for my parents, and I started to have an alternative story. My parents were never told they were loved. They were only supposed to know because they were sent to school or bought clothes. You were just supposed to know you were loved, and there was no expression of it, right? So now I just do these really silly things on my phone, and I randomly just decide I'll text my mom, and I'll just wake up and I'll just go, "Hey mama, I love you," and I'll just wait. And now because I'm comfortable with the fact that I know I'm loved, and that narrative through this work has kind of affirmed me in my relationship with Mama. I'll go, "Mama, I love you," and she will respond, "I trust you're well." She would do, it's like a resignation letter. It's like an official declaration.
For my previous email.
As per our conversation. Like I said previously, oh my God, it's hilarious. Deeply uncomfortable for her because she just has no blueprint and no words to express that. My dad is the same. I go, "Love you, Dad," and he goes, "May God bless you and straighten your path." The words cannot come out. And I just think that is a sign that my parents are so traumatized. And it's more reason for why I need to extend them more grace, more love, more compassion, because it is possible. I'm literally the first person in their life to tell them I love you. What a difficult thing, because they've never been told. So how do I even respond? It is possible. I'm the first person in my mom's life to say I love you.
That I might be the first person to tell my parents they're loved.
Yeah. I mean, they might know from other interactions, but literally to just say, "Mom, I love you," it's just like, what do I do with that? I'm 50-something years old and I've just never been told that. So it helps me to just break easily.
How can people reach you? People who are not in Australia or who are in Australia, how can people reach you? How can people access your services? Because all of us need therapy. How do we access it?
So I'm based in Australia. So if you're based in Australia, you can easily just look me up or reach me, on Instagram. If you're based in Africa, in Kenya more specifically, you can find me on Instagram at Healing conversations.
Is it healing underscore?
Yeah, healing underscore conversations. Or you can just literally just type my name and it will come up with my handle.
Yeah.
And you know, I have some special spots that I have in my therapy clinic for people specifically based in Africa.
Oh, nice.
For reduced prices, because I know it can be quite difficult, but I do that as my I guess it's my connection with home, but also I know how much we need it and how expensive it is.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm so grateful for this conversation. I'm so grateful.
No worries.
Subscribe. Subscribe.